The employer would like to ask for a postponement to get a witness that said is available on the 11th of January. Her name is Hlaudi Motsoening. Number two, during the cross-examination of the witness that just left, Mr. Daddy, there is an issue that arises of a termination of employment and re-employment. I do believe that it is going to be necessary to have that evidence to educate those witnesses. I would submit that in considering...
Just let me understand, during the cross-examination there's evidence that came forward?
Yes.
With regard to the employment of the employee?
Yes, again, he was dismissed and at least contract at some stage what has to do with the test to be terminated and was re-employed.
Yes.
Yes, I would put it that way.
Yeah.
I would submit that in deciding the postponement, the prejudice to be suffered by the employer.
Yes.
And the employee should be considered. The interest of the public should be taken into account and must be audible.
Yes.
And the nature of the evidence.
Can you just elaborate on the prejudice, please?
I would submit that if such evidence is not led, the employer will suffer prejudice in that a very important piece of evidence will be missing in these proceedings. I would submit that in weighing the three, in weighing all what I said with the prejudice that will be suffered by the employee, the employer is the one to suffer more prejudice, and the interest of public will outweigh the prejudice to be suffered by the employee, if there's any that he is going to suffer. That will be the application.
Thank you, Mr. Majabu.
Chair, perhaps, the more I listen to my colleague, I become more dumbfounded by the minute. Now he says the interest of the public matters. A few minutes ago, in support of an application to kick the media out, the interest of the public did not matter, when I in fact emphatically indicated that this very matter is of such a nature that there is a great deal of public interest that attached to it. And now, in persuading you to grant the same employer that brought us here on charges for an indulgence, now all of a sudden you must consider the interest of the public. Is he talking about what is interesting to the public or what is in the public interest? I do not know. But certainly, there is a difference between public interest and what is interesting to the public from the point of view of public curiosity. I agree with him, though, that there is a great deal of public interest in this matter. But that is not the only consideration that you must take into account. Chair, the request for an indulgence as a matter of law, the request for a postponement rather, as a matter of law, is an indulgence that the requester must amplify to enable you to exercise your discretion in a judicious manner. You have been told that in my cross-examination, new evidence arose. It's not new evidence. I specifically asked the witness an opinion on the basis that he himself is a lawyer. And I prefaced that particular question by saying, let me take advantage of the fact that you are a lawyer, not a labor lawyer, because you chided me previously on that issue. What is the effect of the termination of my client's employment in 2006 vis-a-vis the re-employment in 2008, resulting in him being issued with a certificate of good service for 5 years? He said he is unable to comment on that because he is not privy to the circumstances relating thereto. And the chair also indicated that what you are being asked for is your opinion, to which he answered in the affirmative. Now, how can that be a factor to be taken into account? That's a legal issue that you, chair, will determine. It is not evidence. That's the first thing. So that is not even an issue that enters the continuum of the factors that we must take into account. The chair quite rightly asked, and I listened quite attentively, what is the prejudice? He says, the prejudice that the employer's piece of evidence will be excluded. But we don't know what piece of evidence is he talking about. The same employer preferred charges on the 12th of October, was sitting on the 10th of December. That employer tells you that some piece of evidence is going to be excluded if you don't grant a postponement. But here's the thing. I didn't hear my colleague taking you, chair, into confidence to tell you when was it that the employer first made contact with this witness, because you need to take that into account. When was it that the employer got a response from that witness pertaining to her availability? I figure out LCJ is a female. So that you can then determine for yourself whether or not the timing is of such a nature that you should err on the side of preference towards the employee, the employer. You are not told that. As a matter of fact, all we know is that as early as Tuesday, my colleague indicated that this particular employee is touring somewhere in Mpumalanga, Bela, and mentioned 3 cities. And back then, I gave advance warning to my colleague on record that in the event where a request for a postponement is going to be mounted on that self-same basis, I'm going to object. The employer was directed again yesterday and the day before to say use all your endeavors to ensure that those witnesses' attendance is secured. Now, we don't even know if this particular witness was in fact subpoenaed or requested in writing to be present. You don't even have a written response from that particular person. I'm not gainsaying what my colleague says. He's a fellow colleague. I accept that his witness will only be available on the 11th of January. But that's not the test. The test is, when did the SABC itself know that it is going to require the evidence of this witness? What steps did it take as soon as it had that knowledge? I have repeatedly requested a list of witnesses from the SABC to enable us to deal with these pre-trial issues. I had not been favored with that request, with that, other than an SMS that I got from my colleague telling me about the 3 witnesses that we dealt with 2 days ago. The first time that we learned of this additional witness was on my probing. Now, Chair, it cannot be that a legal issue on its own can amplify a request for a postponement. The public interest that now all of a sudden metamorphosed into a factor to be taken into account on its own cannot be persuasive enough. He says on the issue of prejudice, the employer will suffer more. I have never heard, without being facetious, it is the employer that charged the employee. The employee is here to answer to charges that were put by the self-same employer. And the employer says because if its witness is on holiday, the matter should be rolled over to next year. Nothing is said of the fact that we're on the back of a court order. I would have expected the pro forma prosecutor to be protective of the SABC's rights here, because it is the SABC that runs the risk of being found in contempt of court, not even my client. The SABC elected to prefer charges on him on the 12th of October, supposedly complying with the court order. The self-same court order says these proceedings must be finalized within 60 days. On my arithmetic, the 30th of November would have been the first 30 days. I mean, the 12th of November, the 12th of December is your 60 days. Now, nothing is said of that important piece of court directive. You are told that for some reason the public interest will suffer. There's no prejudice to my client. Now, here's the thing. Every single day that we come here, it costs my client a lot of money. My services do not come cheap. Secondly, there is a lot of emotional trauma that attaches to this matter, precisely because of the ongoing public narrative. Thirdly, he is himself on voluntary leave. His leave days having expired. The employer says nothing about that. What happens between now and the resumption of these proceedings if the chair were to be minded in that direction? This is not information that the chairman must probe from the requester. It is information that must be volunteered in amplification of such a request. I'm not here to satisfy a public interest alone. What I am here is to ensure that justice is done and all of these competing factors are counterbalanced in an equitable manner. So far, Chair, there is absolutely nothing before you with respect that should even nudge you in the direction of postponing. You don't even know for sure that on the 11th that Ms. LCG Oosthuizen will be present. Nothing has been presented to you other than the say-so of my colleague. We run the real risk that even on that day, it may well be that he may not be back from holiday. And what happens next? In conclusion, Chair, I believe that the reasons furnished by my colleague do not meet the minimum threshold that would enable you to exercise your discretion in favor of such a request. And we ask that such an application be dismissed outrightly, and in the event we are to be successful, would be in a state of readiness to proceed. However, we leave the decision in your capable hands.
Thank you, Mr. Majavu. Mr. Palani, any reply?
Yes, Chair. My colleague speaks about the public interest during the application for the exclusion of the media and the cameras. The reason why the application was brought was to protect the witnesses. It is in the public interest that when witnesses are testifying, they must be free, they must volunteer to give information in a chronological manner without any intimidation or whatsoever. So it is the public interest that is raising during media and how it is construed in this application, it is different.
Yes.
It is in a public interest that this matter should be concluded and almost all evidence must be presented.
Yes.
Yes. And then the issue about the client suffering prejudice regarding issues of costs cannot outweigh the importance of this matter in the eyes of the public.
Yes.
Yes, that is my reply.
Okay, just thank you for that, Mr. Palani. In all fairness to you, I would just like you to indicate to me with regard, I understand your basis with regard to the witness that's not available now, but I don't understand the basis with regard to the new evidence that you have to now go investigate. How does that relate to any of the charges that is in front of me? This is the problem I'd like you to just elaborate on.
The issue
How's
of...
the relevance of that? You understand what I'm asking you?
Yes.
Because there's no such charge in front of me with what you want to go and inquire about. Understand what I'm saying?
The issue, if I was hearing what my colleague's evidence was going, I think it will be important to get those witnesses to hear the reasons and circumstances on how he was rehired.
I understand. That
Yes.
would be interesting to know.
Yes.
But how does that relate to relevance on the charges that is in front of me? Because obviously all relevant evidence must be placed before me and not irrelevant evidence. Unless there's a motive, unless there's something you can convince me on why it is relevant, you understand?
On the issue of misrepresentation,
No, but are you guessing now or what are you saying?
I'm not guessing. I'm saying
Because
that
I want
it
you
is
to tell me
relevant.
what the relevance is of whether he was fired and came back later, which is not informing on the charge.
It is relevant on the basis that him being rehired does not, I want to clarify whether it exclude the fact that he did initially made such misrepresentation when he was being rehired. It is a point I need to clear up. The fact of the matter is that the witnesses said he did make a misrepresentation regarding his qualification, and then the way my colleague was putting it, I need to clarify it to the effect that he indeed made that misrepresentation, regardless of what happened in the near future. But there was misrepresentation regarding the qualifications.
Is that anything else you'd like to say?
I may just take instructions.
Yeah.
And also, I've just been given, regarding the issue of a court order, the instruction has just come from the employer that he will attempt to have the mandate extended.
Anything else?
Yes, the issue of a court order, I think if this application is to be made, we will know what is to happen. Yes, that is the application.
Is that all?
Yes.
Mr. Majabu, I've asked Mr. Palani with regards to the relevance. Would you like to comment on that or not?
Indeed, Chair, I see he keeps being passed notes from people behind. I must indicate that, as a matter of principle, I don't have a problem with a colleague taking instructions, but it cannot be that there are notes that are being passed around and being handed to him. But on the question that you've asked, Chair, he on the relevance that, as you put rightly to him, it is not a matter that requires further investigation. A proposition was put to the witness who was present before us. The witness gave his opinion. It is a question of law that my colleague and I can address in argument about. It does not require investigation. In fact, I'm actually even more dumbfounded because I even confronted that witness with the information from the self-same employer. It is the SABC that gave him that 5-year certificate. And we don't need rocket science. If you look at that, it talks about 5 years in 2013. It does not talk about 20 years record from 1995. That a misrepresentation happened in 1995 is pretty much on the table. It does not require further investigation by the self-same employer. Lastly, Chair, look at the charge sheet again. It bears absolutely no relevance to the charges before you. And I therefore feel that even on the second bite of the cherry, my colleague still doesn't get it. I stand by my submissions. This application is unmeritorious.
Thank you, Mr. Majabu. My ruling is the following. I've applied my mind to the various addresses in front of me, and especially what is being placed before me, why the employer seeks the indulgence. Mr. is indeed correct that it is an indulgence, and specifically under the circumstances I've already indicated on Tuesday that I will not easily grant any further delays. What has been placed before me with regards to seeking the indulgence falls short of postponing this matter any further. Should it be necessary, I will deal with it in more detail during my judgment. The application is refused.
Mr. Chair, please.
Thank you, Mr. Palani. You may proceed.
I have no further witnesses.
Is that your matter, your case?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Major.
We are indeed in a state of readiness to proceed. With your leave, Chair, I would call Mr. Alvain Kloppers.
Is there any reason why you don't do it in chronology with the employee first? Or, I don't mind, but you perhaps just tell me.
Chair, I prefer to start with this particular witness because he is the direct witness, as will become evident when he testifies pertaining
I'm not saying you must call the employee, I'm just asking, should you call him, why out of chronology?
I haven't even made up my mind yet as to whether or not I'll call the employee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Major. Where's Mr. Thompson?
May I?
Yes, please. So you may be seated there. Full name, sir? What language do you speak?
English and Afrikaans.
What would you prefer?
English.
Okay, your full names?
Hlaudi Motsoening. Hlaudi Motsoening.
Bring the mic closer to you, Mr. Kloppers.
Yes, indeed. You can speak up a little bit.
Do you have any objection to taking the describe us?
No problem, sir.
You don't say that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God.
So help you God.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Majabu.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Kloppers, before I proceed with your testimony, you will appreciate that there is a whole contingent of the media together with the cameras. Do you have any difficulty testifying in front of the media at all?
No, sir. Not at all. It can also be a live broadcasting to the outside newsrooms.
Thank you. You're kind indeed. Would you have any difficulty if the cameras were to face you at all, so that we get out of the way?
No, they can face me all the time.
Thank you. I'm going to also ask you to try and speak up a bit.
Yes, sir.
Perhaps push the entire mic close to you. Yeah, that big one, yes.
No, you can take away that one you're touching. The one that's important for me is the black one standing up in the air.
My associate will assist you with the leave of the chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kloppers. Mr. Kloppers, kindly indicate your current employment situation. I see my colleague is sorry.
Who was he, sorry?
He was sworn in.
Sorry, I missed that.
My colleague wanted to find out if indeed Mr. Kloppers was sworn in, and I said yes.
Okay, yes, yeah.
Oh, am I wrong?
Thank you for reminding me, but he was. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Kloppers, kindly indicate what your current employment status is.
Chair, I'm the Provincial General Manager of the Gauteng Province of the SABC, and my and I'm based in the provincial office in Tshwane.
When did you first enter the employ of the SABC, South African Broadcasting Corporation, Suid-Afrikaanse Uitzenddienste Koöperasie?
That was way back, almost 38 years, in 1977.
1977. Have you at any stage between 1977 to date ever left the employ of the SABC, regardless of the capacity that you currently hold?
No, sir, I've never left the SABC.
When you first joined the SABC, what was your position? And attached to that position, what were your responsibilities?
Sir, I started as a radio journalist. And I was assigned to do stories. My beat or my focus areas at the time were agriculture, municipal affairs, and politics.
Do you know Mr. Hlaudi? May I beg the pardon the chair, the witness forgot to switch off his phone.
Just a minute, sorry. Sorry about this, Chair.
That's fine.
Do you know Mr. Hlaudi George Motsoening, who is sitting to my left?
Yes, sir, I know him very well.
Would you be kind enough to explain to the chair and the committee when was your first encounter and the circumstances pertinent thereto?
Chair, way back in the winter of 1993, the SABC paid a visit to the then homeland of Kwakwa. And we had a meeting with the then Chief Minister of Kwakwa, Dr. T.K. Mupedi. And after the meeting, we had lunch. And when I left the government building in Pudadichaba,
Perhaps just put that off, please. Thank you.
when I left the government building in Pudadichaba, I was approached by a young man, and he asked me whether I was with the SABC. I said yes. And he introduced himself as Hlaudi Motsoeneng. And he said to me that he was the freelance stringer or freelance correspondent of the SABC in Kwakwa, and that he was filing news reports for the current affairs show of the then Radio Sesotho. He asked me whether it's possible to have a permanent employment in the SABC. I gave him my business card and I said we must talk, because at the time it was very clear to management that the SABC will have to upscale its infrastructure for African languages in the corporation to the same level as that of Afrikaans and English. So there was a need for us to look for talent. That was how we met. And then subsequently from that, he made contact and yes, and the relationship developed.
Is it correct that as far back as 1993, he was already filing stories or journalistic material which the SABC used in its various programs?
Yes, sir. He was employed as a stringer, freelance correspondent in the homeland of Kwakwa, filing from there for Radio Sesotho and for the newsroom. You must understand, whatever you file, even today in the SABC, that news will be translated and will be made available to all other services of the SABC. But primarily because he was Sesotho speaking, he filed for the current affairs shows of the then Radio Sesotho. But not only was filing, sir, he was assigned to cover certain stories, and also the newsroom at the time then paid him for the stories filed.
The newsroom of the SABC?
The newsroom of the SABC in Bloemfontein. That was the administrative office for the Free State region, and Kwakwa was part of that administrative setup.
Okay, I follow. So his relationship, to the best of your recollection, with the SABC as a journalist or as a stringer, at least started in 1993, or in 1993 it was already in existence?
It was already in existence, sir.
Do you know whether or not the SABC as far back then was satisfied with the quality of whatever stories he filed? Are you able to shed any light on that before I move on?
Sir, when I later on talked to the management, they acknowledged his contributions. Nobody ever mentioned to me that his contributions were not of good quality. In fact, they paid him. They kept him for, I don't know, for an extended period as a freelance journalist.
Okay. To your knowledge, at what point, if any at all, did he become a permanent employee of the SABC?
So the things developed over a period of time, but then the appointment was granted, and he started in the full employ of the SABC on 1 March 1995.
Are you able to indicate to us who was instrumental in making that final decision that his status be one of permanent as opposed to a freelance stringer? How did it come about that he now stopped to be a freelance stringer and he became permanent in March 1995, as you've just indicated?
So I myself was very much instrumental in his appointment. Although the final letter of appointment was signed by Mr. Christo Olivier, who was then at that time the head of the province. But in the run-up to that letter, that final appointment, I was very much instrumental. I had a task to execute the board decision of the SABC to make newsrooms countrywide representative of the new political circumstances in South Africa, taking into account that all the newsrooms had to have people who can speak the various languages, who can represent the various audiences of the SABC to the same level as Afrikaans and English.
Would you say you were basically implementing a transformation agenda of the SABC?
Very much so. It was a big, important agenda of the first board of the SABC to transform the SABC.
Well, you're watching SABC News. Welcome to the News Today desk. I'm Kirshni Govender. Well, you've been watching live visuals of the SABC's Chief Operating Officer. That's Mr. Hlaudi Motsoeneng's disciplinary hearing. That hearing, of course, underway in Sandton today. The presiding officer in the last few minutes has dismissed an application to have that hearing postponed, for now that is. You'll recall that it was Mr. Motsoeneng himself who wanted these disciplinary hearings to be broadcast on live television. Well, we'll be dipping in and out of those hearings throughout the afternoon, so do stay tuned to SABC News. For now, let's move on to this afternoon's headlines. Yes, and we start at home. It's a big one indeed. South Africa's new Finance Minister, David van Rooyen, has been sworn in at the Union Buildings a few minutes ago in Pretoria. Sindisiwe Mqela, who was convicted of murdering Nkululeko Flaba Khabedi, granted bail of 5,000 rand today. And the deadline looms large indeed for a new global climate deal in Paris, France. Well, time now to cross back to the disciplinary hearings underway in Sandton. Let's listen in.
Would I be correct in saying the Bloemfontein newsroom was the administrative hub of places such as Qwaqwa,
That's right,
amongst
sir.
others.
That's right, sir.
And that is where there was the greatest resistance, for whatever reasons that we won't go into.
That's right, sir.
Right. Now, with specific reference to Mr. Motsoening, are you aware now, or were you aware then, of any reason why he could not be lawfully employed as a trainee journalist of the SABC?
No, sir, there was no reason not to employ him. In fact, he was on a freelance basis already in the employment of the SABC. And not only did we use his material, but we also paid him for the material that he delivered to us. And right from the outset, right from the onset, he made it very clear to me, there on the steps of that government building, that he did not have matric. And that message was conveyed to the SABC, not once but several times.
Okay, let's hang tight there. When you say, as I understand, when you first met him at the government buildings, Sandton, TK Mopedi, may his soul rest in peace. Back in 1993 then, how did you come to know that he did not have a matric? Just so that we get this out of the way. I'm sorry to take you back.
No, that's fine. So when he approached me there on the steps of the government building, he said to me, he's our stringer, our freelance operator there in Qwaqwa. He was filing for the then Radio Sesotho. I said to him, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know that we had a person like that in that part of the country. So I asked him, I said to him, and he said to me he would like to have permanent employment. So I asked him, do you have, what qualifications do you have? And then he said to me, I've got no matric.
Within how many minutes, hours, or seconds of your discussion did he disclose that fact to you?
I think it was within the first 60 seconds.
That he said to you, Meneer, I do not have a matric.
That's right, sir.
He said that to you.
He said it to me.
And after saying that to you, already back in 1993, did you regard it then as an impediment to his employment? Was there, to your knowledge, a policy that would have precluded him from being employed as a trainee journalist on a permanent basis?
I didn't regard it as an impediment. My response was, perhaps it's an opportunity for you to further your studies. But even until today, nobody in the SABC said to me that it was an impediment not having a matric certificate.
So sitting as you are now, almost over 30 years later, you are still not sure whether even back then it was a requirement, the matric issue.
So you must remember, it was very important for the SABC to acquire certain talent. And taking into account the socio-political circumstances of the time, we probably employed a lot of people without all the qualifications.
Without matrics in particular?
Yes, sir. And in this case, it happened, and I made it very clear to the SABC, because the person was working for us, he was filing for us, he knew the requirements of radio production. That was the talent we were looking for.
And that is the talent you spotted at those government building steps?
Indeed, sir.
Did you at any stage have to convince your superiors or higher echelons of the SABC that we found our men in that part of the country?
So I referred to Hlaudi a couple of times to colleagues in head office in Auckland Park. And I never received any objection from them. I even discussed it at the time with the new head of radio, Mr. Govan Reddy. If I'm not mistaken, he started in January 1994. And I explained to him the background, and I said to him that Mr. Motsoening was our correspondent there. The only objection I got was from the then regional or provincial editor in Bloemfontein. I
And does he have a name that you can remember?
Yes, sir, he has passed on since, but it was Mr. Jan Olafie.
May his soul rest in peace.
So you see, what happened at the time, all the newsrooms were participating, improving their infrastructure, as I've mentioned earlier on. But in the case of Bloemfontein, there was some reluctance. And I discussed it several times. At one stage, Mr. Olafie said to me, but you know, he was not in a position to find Sesotho-speaking people. I said, but how is it possible? You 80% of your population in Bloemfontein, in the Free State, is Sesotho-speaking. He said, yeah, I can't find Sesotho-speaking journalists. I said, but I gave you a name. I gave you a name. It's a person well known to you. He's filing for you. In fact, you're paying for him. It's Hlaudi Motsoeneng. So then I said, you appoint him. Because you're looking for talent. You told me you can't find talent. Here is talent. The man is working for you already. And you're paying him. Why don't you employ him?
And ultimately, after all that resistance, would it be fair to conclude that in March 1995, he was eventually appointed?
He was then appointed on 1 March 1995, sir.
Do you remember whether or not the SABC itself, before formally appointing him in March 1995, did anything at all to further upskill him?
Yes, sir. And you must remember that there was a big need in the SABC, and they realized that we will have to provide training opportunities to the new people. We got various institutions and various broadcasters to assist the SABC. To mention two, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation was also brought in. But then there was a reputable institution called the Thomson Foundation from the United Kingdom, and they conducted some training courses. The SABC requested them to assist, and they conducted a number of training courses. If I'm not mistaken, they even do it today. So and then in February 1995, such a course was presented at the SABC, and Hlaudi Motsoeneng, he enrolled for that course, and he did the course, and he completed the course successfully, and he got a certificate that he attended that course. And that was a sort of call it a breaching course, to assist you to understand the formal journalistic environment. It was a course in radio journalism, yes, and he was subsequently appointed then on 1st March 1995 as a junior radio reporter in Bloemfontein newsroom.
That appointment came only upon completion of that course, the Thomson Foundation course.
That's right, sir. The course, he completed the course in February. It started in February 1995. It ended in February 1995. And then the following month, 1st of March, he was appointed as a junior reporter.
Did you see that certificate to satisfy yourself that he indeed attended and completed the course?
Yes, sir. I've got here in my file also a copy of that certificate, and I'm sure also that that certificate is in your file.
Chair, for the sake of progress, may I just hand the witness with my colleague having had sight of this document, just to see if it tallies with what he has. May that be put to... The purpose is purely to confirm if it is the certificate that the witness has testified about.
Mr. Palani?
I have no objection.
Thank you.
Can you basically just read into the record the name of the foundation, and from the part that says this is to certify that, and then ultimately the date, signifying the date of attendance? That's really all I want you to deal with.
The certificate reads the Thompson Foundation certificate. This is to certify that Hlaudi Motsoening of the South African Broadcasting Corporation has successfully completed a course in radio journalism, and it's dated February 6 to February 17, 1995, and the venue is Johannesburg, and signed by 3 officials of the Thompson Foundation.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask that it be handed in and marked the next chronological?
Exhibit N. I see is that also a copy that you have there, Mr. Kloppers? Okay, that's fine. I'm happy with that. Just mark it Exhibit N.
Yes.
Yes?
I just didn't want him to page through.
That's fine.
And I curiously note that they refer to him as Hlaudi Motsoening of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. Who paid for that course?
So the SABC paid for the course. Now, I checked this morning with somebody who was some years ago involved with the presentation of these training courses. It was sort of standard practice that only full-time employees would attend this course. Now this is that in the case of Hlaudi Motsoening, he was not in the employ of the SABC yet. Now my understanding is, and that's what I was told, and that's also my understanding, is that because of his previous employment as a freelancer and his commitment and passion for radio news as he displayed as a freelance operator in Kwakwa, and the fact that he approached us, and the fact that we have conversed several times about employment, and he showed the interest, we have granted him the opportunity then to attend this course.
Which the SABC paid for?
That's right, sir.
In fact, he attended at the instance of the SABC, is that correct?
That's right, sir.
Thank you. Now, he completes that certificate. You are now satisfied that even if there may have been some impediment, but this Thompson Foundation course, in your language, was sort of a bridging arrangement. Is that a fair proposition? Am I correct?
I think so. I think, I myself, I've never attended these courses, but my understanding is that they would have covered the basic principles of journalism, and they would have explained to them the more formal environment, the formal broadcasting environment, taking into account controls rooms and studios and typewriters and computers. Yes, computers were there at the time. So all these things to assist you with formal journalism, they would have taken into account.
Yes, but the point I'm making is that it is the SABC as the would-be formal employer at the time that recognizes his talent, that sends him to this reputable course. He attends that course, that covers whatever ground, and only upon completion of that is he given permanent employment. Is that what happened?
That's what happened, sir.
Other than that, to your knowledge, on pain of your conscience, was there anything else that would have precluded him from being appointed in that junior position?
I'm not aware of any such impediments.
Now, the decision to finally appoint him, you said you were very much instrumental in it, but eventually it was signed by the late Tian Olivier. Is that correct?
By the late, it was signed, the employment letter was signed by Christo Olivier.
Oh, Christo
Olivier, who was, so I think, just for clarity's sake, Christo Olivier was the general manager in charge of the province who signed the employment letter, yes, dated 17 February 1995. The late Jan Olivier, he was the newsroom boss, the newsroom editor. Yes. That is the guy who was objecting to Motsoeneng's employment.
But he eventually signed his employment letter?
No, the employment letter was signed by the head of the SABC in Bloemfontein, which was not Jan Olivier, but the general manager in charge of the province. He signed the employment letter.
And he's also an Olivier?
That's Christo Olivier.
Okay, that's why I got it.
Two Oliviers, yes.
But the fact of the matter is, the GM of the province, who is senior to the one that was rebellious, signed eventually.
That's right, sir.
Is that how it happened?
That is how it happened.
With your full motivation, full support?
That's right, sir.
Knowing full well that the man doesn't have a matric?
Exactly, sir.
He having disclosed that to you within the first 60 seconds of your discussion?
Yes, sir, and as I've indicated to you, I've discussed it with my colleagues in Bloemfontein, in Johannesburg. Subsequently, I also raised the issue with Mr. Jan Olivier, the late Jan Olivier, who was in charge of the newsroom. And then and then even Mr. Govan Reddy was the new head of radio, flew down to Bloemfontein, and he talked to Jan Olivier and said, listen here, we need some progress here with transformation in your newsroom, and you need to employ talent. And I've been told by Alban Kloppers that you are resisting the employment of Hlaudi Motsoeneng, who's filing for you from Kwakwa. You should take into account his talent. And on the basis of all this rigmarole, he got his employment, and the letter was signed by Christo Olivier.
So the big boss had to fly from Johannesburg to go crack the whip to this recalcitrant one in Bloemfontein?
That's what happened, sir.
Right. Now, the reason I took you through that in a measure of detail is because, perhaps first let me ask you, are you aware that Mr. Motsoening, amongst other charges that he's facing charges of lying to the SABC about his matric qualifications in order to get a job as a trainee journalist in 1995. That is one of the charges, and I'm paraphrasing it, that Mr. Motsoening stands accused of today. What is your response to that?
Chair, Mr. Motsoening is not a liar. He certainly didn't lie to me, and when I conveyed this message, I certainly didn't lie to the SABC. Everybody here in the head office and in Bloemfontein was aware of the fact that this person did not have matric.
Are you sure about that, sir?
Well, sir, I discussed it with several people. I discussed it with the radio news management. I discussed it with the head of radio in Johannesburg. I discussed it with my HR colleagues in Johannesburg, and they would have talked to their HR colleagues in Bloemfontein, and I discussed it several times with Jan Olivier. He was very obnoxious, and eventually he was told to employ the person, and he employed him.
All right. A lot has been put in the public domain, especially pursuant to a report that was issued by the Public Protector of the Republic of South Africa, my colleague, esteemed colleague, Advocate Tulima Tonzela, on or about February 2014. In one of the findings that she made, having spoken to several people at the SABC, Mr. Motsoening himself, and she says, having looked at various documentation, she came to a conclusion and made a finding that Mr. Motsoening misrepresented the fact that he obtained a matric with a view to getting employment by the SABC as a trainee journalist. What is your comment to that? I know you don't have the report of the Public Protector, but I'm sure you would have read about it in the media. Take it as a fact that that is what she found. And that metamorphosed into a charge sheet by the self-same SABC that employed him.
So the Public Protector never spoke to me, never interviewed me.
Okay, we'll get to that.
But when I saw the reports, I said to my colleagues, and I've said it for many years, I've said to them, as far as I'm concerned, Motsoening never lied to me. And at what he told me on the steps of the government building, I conveyed to the SABC. So it was very clear to the SABC from the onset that there was no matric certificate.
To extend that logic, would I be correct in saying with that prior disclosure before his employment, he had no reason to lie about it?
No, he had no reason to lie, but he was very honest. He was right from the onset, he was extremely honest and upfront about his qualifications.
And tell me, sir, you said that since 1977 to date, you've never left the employ of the SABC. Do you have any reason why you, like others, were not invited by the public protector?
No, sir, I wouldn't know. I really don't know why the public protector did not interview.
Okay. And everybody knew that you never immigrated to Australia. You've always been in the country and in the employ of the SABC. Am I correct?
That's correct, sir.
I will put it to you, and I will invite you to respond. On or about November 2013, I, on behalf of Mr. Motsoening, made submissions to the public protector in response to her provisional report, in which, amongst others, I attached your affidavit, which I will take you through in a short while, which I had obtained from the very SABC itself, and indicated to her that on this particular preliminary point, we believe that your finding or your provisional finding may be incorrect. Kindly have regard to an affidavit of, amongst others, yourself, Pula Mutibi, but let me focus on you.
That's right.
February 2014, the final report comes out with the exact provisional finding now being a permanent finding. The point where I'm getting to is that, at the very least, the public protector was notified in November 2013 of your existence, the fact that you are not in Australia, and the fact that you had deposed to an affidavit under oath, and a copy thereof was made available to you. Now the question is, between November 2013 and February 2014, when the final report was released, were you ever extended the courtesy of invitation by the public protector?
No, sir, I received no invitation.
Had you been invited by the public protector, would your evidence thus far have been different to her insofar as the role that you played in the appointment of this Mr. Motsoening, who's now painted as a liar?
Sir, there's only one story that I can tell, and that's the truth.
Right. May I then, with the leave of the chair, direct your attention to a document before my colleague jumps up to object. It is an affidavit duly signed and attested to by your
Well, you've been watching live visuals of the SABC's Chief Operating Officer, Hlaudi Motsoeneng's disciplinary hearing underway in Sandton. Unfortunately, we have lost that link for now. We'll try and get it up and running in a few minutes. The presiding officer has dismissed an application to have those hearings postponed for now. We're really at that stage of the hearing where Mr. Motsoeneng's 20-year career at the SABC is being currently explored and his credentials being interrogated. Being questioned now is Mr. Alvin Kloppers, the SABC's regional manager for Gauteng. He's saying that Mr. Motsoeneng did declare in an interview back in 1993 that he did not have a matric certificate. Also coming to light is the fact that Mr. Motsoeneng did complete a course in radio journalism. That was back in February of 1995, we understand, a course run then by the Thompson Foundation that was paid for for by the SABC. Now, upon completion of this course, Mr. Motsoeneng was employed permanently by the SABC, that appointment effective from March 1st, 1995. Mr. Kloppers, who's been in the employ of the SABC since 1977, says Mr. Motsoeneng was honest and forthright about the lack of a matric certificate. On that note, it's time to take a short break. We'll be back with more news just now.
Technology isn't all scary. There's also fun stuff like gaming.
Lots of women do play games, whether it's on their phones or their tablets.
Then there are Africans who are using new tools to make other people's lives much easier.
We typed the whole CV on a small, QWERTY Nokia phone.
For all these and other technology and social media news, join me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
Health Talk looks into the increase of suicide and symptoms leading to suicide.
The death wish grows when you go into depression after a lot of stress.
And often when we talk about suicide, we don't talk about a person wanting to stop living, but rather wanting to stop living in pain.
After losing everything in life that lead you to no options but suicide.
I had that spirit of fear in me to say, don't even face tomorrow.
After being overwhelmed with stress and trauma, it becomes difficult to have self-control.
People learning tools and skills that will practically enable them to meet these challenges.
In trying times, never be alone. Reach out for help to a better solution.
Support should be done by a counsellor or psychologist where you're able to speak about how you're feeling in a safe, accepting, non-judgmental space.
For all your health tips, join Dr. Silo Mudawung every Saturday from 9 till 10.
You're watching News Today. I'm Kirshni Govender. Let's take a look at the main stories we're tracking for you this afternoon. Well, South Africa's new Finance Minister, David van Rooyen, is to be sworn in at the Union Buildings in Pretoria in an hour's time. Political parties, economists and ordinary South Africans have expressed shock following last night's announcement that President Jacob Zuma had removed Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene from his portfolio. Well, the rand hit an all-time low on the back of that announcement, breaking through the 15 rand to the dollar and 23 rand to the pound levels. Well, the woman convicted of murdering Nkululeko Flaba Khabedi has just been granted bail of 15,000 rand. 26-year-old Cindy Siwe Manqala's sentence hearing will take place next year. She was found guilty of intentionally killing her rap star boyfriend at